Salutations! Today we're getting inducted into induction. This discussion is going to veer slightly into the realm of epistemology, the science of knowledge, and what it means for the actual application of logic. In The Republic, Book 6, Socrates uses his iconic analogy of the divided line to explain the nature of knowledge to Glaucon. The line is divided unequally, and each section is divided again according to the same ratio as the whole. When this is done, BC and CD are the same length. Each segment of the line represents a kind of mental activity, or a power of the soul. AB.
AB.
AB. Well, it's a buzzing thing, isn't it?
The first and smallest segment represents akasia, translated as imagination or conjecture. This relates to shadows, reflections, dreams, and to images or representations of things, be they real or imaginary. The common factor is that they look, sound, or otherwise seem to be something they are not. Genuine knowledge concerning such illusory things is of course impossible, and the objects of this kind of mental activity are indefinite. Consider the example of two children arguing about whose imaginary character is more powerful, constantly adding and changing their abilities to counter one another.
Oh,
3.
The shock sword from Fallout from 3 wouldn't even hold a candle to this baby. This baby could cut that thing in half.
People who uncritically accept what they are told and what appears to their senses are using akasia. The segment BC represents pistis, translated as faith or belief. This relates to material objects in themselves. Since matter is subject to generation and corruption, as well as being confined to a spatial location, all information about such objects is conditional and, in a sense, indefinite, and as it enters the mind through the bodily senses, it is uncertain. Because of this, it is impossible to have true knowledge of material objects as one can with intelligibles. This is why it is called belief, because we believe based on evidence rather than know for certain that, for example, the kettle has boiled.
Ow! Heat was hot!
The segment CD represents dianoia, discursive thought. This pertains to things which in principle cannot be otherwise, such as numbers and ratios. These entities are not subject to generation or corruption, and are not spatially or temporally confined. They are as they are, eternally and perfectly, and they do not depend on individual instances. These universal things therefore can be truly known. The segment DE represents noesis, or intellectual intuition. This corresponds to the intelligible essences, the Platonic forms, from which objects of discursive thought are derived. This kind of knowledge is primary and direct, without intermediaries, and involves a kind of cognitive identity between knower and known.
That equals you, dude.
The relationship between AB and BC is the same as the relationship between CD and DE. As sense perception is caused by material objects and points towards them, dialectical thought is dependent on the intelligible essences and points towards them. So what does any of this have to do with the application of logic? Imaginary and fictional things don't conform to logic, so the application of logic to such things is impossible, or at least not very useful. Sorry, MatPat.
The dog is absolutely your father.
As for intelligible essences, while they can be proposed and eliminated dialectically by considering the effects of their hypothetical existence or non-existence, as demonstrated in the Parmenides, they can't be individually known or defined through a medium like logic without being self-referential. They in fact serve as the foundations for the axioms that make up propositions, making logical statements impossible without them. This leaves us with the middle two sections of the divided line to consider, which according to the geometric construction are the same size. The reasoning applied to each functions according to the same rules, but since the type of input is different, the type of output is also different. Up to now, the kind of reasoning we have been discussing has been deduction, which belongs to the realm of discursive thought or dianoia. This is on the side of knowledge rather than opinion. As previously discussed, in order for something to be properly known, it must be absolutely certain. The initial premises underlying a deductive argument must either be self-evident from their definitions, or be demonstrable from premises which are. For example, all squares have 4 sides is self-evident, since a square must have 4 sides in order to be a square in the first place. But all doors have 4 sides is not, since doors do not have to have 4 sides in order to be doors, and a round or hexagonal door is entirely conceivable. This applies to categories and to universals, but not to material individuals. For example, we could say all spiders naturally have 8 legs, in reference to the taxonomic order or the logical genus, because spiders by definition are of this nature. But we could not say, the spider in your bath has 8 legs, because it could have lost 1 or 2. When logic is applied to individual material objects, the subject of pistis, this is called induction. I was going to put a joke here, but I couldn't think of one. An inductive argument uses a set of examples to predict a general trend. For example, if every Frenchman you've met is a duplicitous pervert, you may assume that the next one will be too.
It's French.
So is eating frogs, cruelty to geese, and urinating in the street.
Because the premises of an inductive argument cannot be certain, an inductive argument cannot be valid. This means it is impossible to use induction to produce actual knowledge. In fact, even to say that an inductive conclusion is probably or likely true is also wrong, because you can't be certain about the likelihood either. For instance, it could be that all the frogs you've met were from Paris and Champagne, while the ones from Normandy, Brittany and Aquitaine are fine upstanding fellows.
Ah, bonjour, monsieur. Sod off.
This is called the problem of induction, something you may have heard of. However, that does not mean that induction isn't a useful application of logic. It is of course impossible to operate in the world without having beliefs about how things around you work. These beliefs are impossible to prove as true, but they can be assumed for usefulness as a heuristic. Instead of aiming for validity, inductive arguments aim for cogency. Cogent means provisionally believable, and for an argument to be cogent it must satisfy 3 conditions. Firstly, there must be no evidence that contradicts either of the premises. Secondly, there must be some evidence to support both of the premises. Thirdly, the conclusion must necessarily follow from the premises as it does in a deductive syllogism, there being no possible alternative to the conclusion if the premises are assumed to be true. If these conditions are met, then the argument is cogent, and as good as it can be based on the evidence you have available. Induction, then, is the system of reason on which the scientific method is based. So now you know your inducts from your outducts, deducts. No idea where I was going with that. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.